ESPN's Stephen A. Smith always gives us his candid opinion no matter what the topic is, which fits in well at this table. Please welcome commentator and executive producer of ESPN's First Take, Stephen A. Smith.
Y'all doing? It's wonderful to see y'all, ladies. How you doing?
What's the A for? I must
Anthony.
know. Anthony. Oh, Anthony.
Anthony, yes.
Anthony. Anthony.
Well, Stephen, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
You, over the weekend, you got the exclusive with Andrew Cuomo, who
Yes.
just announced over the weekend that he's going to be running for mayor of New York City. What did you take away from the time you spent with him, and why do you think he's mounting this comeback?
Well, I think the timing is perfect for him, particularly considering what Eric Adams is experiencing right now in terms of the DOJ stepping in to take over the case, basically to encourage the Southern District of New York to dismiss the case. I think that the vulnerability that exists there is something that Andrew Cuomo senses. Obviously, he's been out of the game for 3.5 years in the aftermath of, sexual harassment allegations, 11 of them to be exact. He spoke about that with me yesterday.
What did he say?
He said that, he didn't point the finger at the ladies, but obviously he proclaimed his innocence. He felt it was a bit politicized, to say the least. And he said, but I dealt with what I dealt with, and I had to look myself in the mirror, recognize my behavior, recognize the fact that I had been a bit impatient, that I'd made a few enemies along the way, ruffled a few feathers. But he said, when you're a leader, that's how it goes sometimes. You're going to ruffle a few feathers, not talking about the sexual harassment allegations, but just in terms of the people that may not have been fans of his, that may have wanted to politicize it, to get him pushed out of office. He says he's learned a lot. He thinks that he's coming back better than ever, and he thinks that he's desperately needed in the city of New York because of the problems that exist with crime in the streets, in terms of the price, cost of living, things of that nature. And his number one priority, he says, is safety, because when safety is not addressed, you can't do anything else.
True.
I thought crime was down in New York.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Eric Adams says. Andrew Cuomo is looking at it from a different lens. I would say this: you have to respect the governor that's a 3-term governor that would have been in a position to capture a 4th term or run for president. Right. So even though we might look at it from that standpoint, he's looking at it from the standpoint, I know what it takes to lead a state. I'm looking at the city within the state that I govern 3 separate terms.
Right.
And the bottom line is I don't like what I'm seeing. So that's the reason why he's in the polls right now. And you can't argue with that.
Well, let me ask you this.
Ahead in the polls.
You mentioned it briefly, but there are calls for the current mayor, Eric Adams, to step down after the Department of Justice told federal prosecutors to drop corruption charges against him. Now, when you spoke with the former governor, who is an attorney as well, did he indicate that Adams may have cut sort of this quid pro quo deal to work with Trump on immigration in exchange for dismissing those charges?
He gave zero indication about that. And this was the interesting part about it. He gave the impression he doesn't have to go that route in order to beat Eric Adams. He thinks he can beat Eric Adams or anybody else in the race based on merit. And then when you take into account Governor Hochul and her decision not to remove Mayor Adams from office, obviously, this is what I talk about when I talk about sports, covering sports. I love the competition. See, we can point to all of those things, just like Eric Adams was asked about Governor Cuomo and what he endured. He said, folks, we'll address that on the campaign trail. The citizens will do what they're going to do. He's ready to go at Cuomo. Cuomo is ready to go at him. It's competition. May the best man win.
Interesting.
Well, let me ask you, you briefly touched on, obviously, the 11 sexual misconduct allegations against him and how he responded to that. But another sort of issue he's going to have to deal with is the nursing homes during COVID. Beliefs that he underreported deaths and was slow to respond. Do you think he will take that on directly on the campaign trail?
I don't think he has a choice because I asked, and if I asked, I know the public's going to be asking before they go to the polls to decide who they're going to vote for, likely between him and Adams. He knows that was a situation he couldn't avoid. He answered the questions in a lengthy fashion, I might add. But in the end, he knows he cannot run for those issues. Those 2 things are things that are going to come up on the campaign trail. The lack of emphasis on nursing homes and the people that were placed in the nursing homes and the deaths that occurred.
Does he have an explanation for it?
He does have. He did have an explanation for it, but it's too long to get into here. I can tell you that much.
Maybe he should come on this show and explain
That's
that.
his plan. I'm sorry, that is his plan. He does plan to come on.
He does plan. He is planning to come. Of course, I mentioned that. I mentioned The View. Come on now.
Well, Stephen, I want to talk about you for a minute.
Yes.
Your name was recently floated as a potential presidential candidate in 2020 for the Democrats. Right. Can I play a clip? You had some pretty tough words.
If you're the Democrats,
That's why Stephen A. Smith is in the news. Because y'all don't have anybody. You don't have anybody. Who you got? I'm not in the news because I'm here. I'm in the news because the Democratic Party is here. Damn it, lower than that. Down at the bottom. They suck right now. Horrible. Because they don't have a voice. Where the hell is the voice?
Don't hold back.
I would say that is quite a voice you brought. I mean, right now in the polls, you're nearly tied with Pete Buttigieg, AOC, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. You have a higher favorability than John Fetterman and Vice President Harris. What do you make of this?
I make of it that citizens, particularly on the left, are desperate. And I mean it when I say it. I think I can beat them all. And I have no desire whatsoever to run for office. I am not a politician. I am not qualified. But I know this much. When you consider who's on the other side and how he's gotten away with saying very little in terms of being coherent and articulating his thoughts clearly and concisely and what have you, this is not something that he's known to do. Yet and still, he has owned the Republican Party since 2015. Not only has he won, the Republican constituency has said, we don't want anybody else but him. We didn't want DeSantis, we didn't want Haley, we didn't want Christie, we didn't want Ramaswamy, we didn't want DeSantis, we didn't want anybody. We want him.
What does that
Who
say
is
about
that
the
person?
Republican Party?
It's not about what it says about the Republican Party. It's about what it says about the Democratic Party.
Why?
Because in the end, if you think about him being impeached twice, 34 felony counts or 34 felony convictions, and they still elected him president, it's not about him winning. It was an indictment against the Democratic Party and what the Democratic Party was offering the American citizens. We might sit up there and talk about, hey, you should be a party for the working class, which the Democratic Party was once known for. They're not known for that right now. Why? Because their message was catering towards others and towards other issues, and they forgot about the people that brought them there, that elevated the Democratic Party to what it was over these last few decades. That's why they lost. He didn't win.
Well,
The Democrats
let's remind
lost.
people what those issues were.
Sure.
Let's remind people what those issues were.
We can do that.
Making sure that families had what they need, SNAP, making sure stuff is there, making sure that the America that we all grew up in, where you could come and be whoever you were supposed to be or want to be, you still have that right. All these things are the things that the Democrats have always said. But now we have a guy who says, yeah, you know, I'm going to bring down the price of eggs, but first I'm going to cut all these jobs, and I'm not going to see why they need to be cut. I'm just going to cut them. Because I'm going to put people in. Well, that's what he's doing. He's doing all
And alienate all our friends around the world.
Yes, dear.
But you're talking about what he's doing. But before you brought that up, you brought up the message that the Democratic Party was disseminating. I'm challenging you on that. That is not what they were doing. I'm not talking
yes,
about.
it was.
I'm not talking
I
about the
was here.
intent.
We did it.
I was here too. I was alive and breathing right here on the air, talking to everybody else. The bottom line is this: you're Joe Biden. You open borders. Now remember, Barack Obama deported more people than Trump did.
Yes.
You know what he didn't do? He didn't stick out his chest and bloviate about it. He just did it.
Yeah.
What does Joe Biden do? Who is a Democrat? Who's the vice president under Barack Obama? He opens borders. Over 12+ million people entered the country. You had stuff going on in the streets. There was a migrant crisis here.
That he's the reason that there is a migrant crisis?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
saying. I'm saying he contributed. I'm saying he contributed to it. But the biggest point I'm making.
He just took the key and just opened up a door?
He just took. Well, that's part of it. Even the Democrats say. Even the Democrats say they did that.
Hold on to
Sure.
that, because I want to make sure that we can come back with enough time.